She thought she was protecting the neighborhood, but when an HOA Karen pepper-sprayed a black woman at the pool, she had no idea the woman's husband was an army lieutenant. What happened next left the entire community and the internet stunned. Saturday mornings in Willow Creek always carried a sense of routine. Lawnmowers hummed, children pedaled down the sidewalks, and neighbors exchanged polite nods over trimmed hedges. For Maya Johnson, it was the perfect backdrop for peace. With a tote bag filled with her sketchbook and a novel, she headed out for a quiet day at the park. Her husband, Lieutenant David Johnson, had left hours earlier for his weekend military drill. Before leaving, he had kissed her cheek and promised dinner together later that evening. David was disciplined, steady, and brave, the qualities that came with years of service. Maya, on the other hand, carried the gentleness of an artist. Together, they were a portrait of balance. As she walked down the sunlit street, Maya waved at Mrs. Lopez, her kindly elderly neighbor who adored her like a granddaughter. The warmth of the neighborhood wrapped around her, until she turned near the community pool. That was where Karen Mitchell emerged. Known for her iron grip on the HOA board, Karen patrolled the neighborhood as if she owned it. Clipboard in hand, lips pursed, she spotted Maya and immediately stepped in front of her path. "Excuse me," Karen's voice sliced the air. "Where do you think you're going?" Maya tilted her head, startled but polite. "Just to the park. Is there a problem?" Karen's eyes narrowed, scanning Maya with suspicion. "This is a private community. You can't just walk around unless you're visiting someone. Who are you here to see?" The words landed like stones. Maya wasn't a stranger. She lived here. She paid dues like everyone else. Yet Karen's tone made her feel like an outsider in her own neighborhood. And this was only the beginning. A few neighbors had already gathered near the pool gate, their chatter fading as they noticed the confrontation. Maya felt their eyes on her, the weight of judgment pressing down even before she answered. "I live here," Maya said calmly, her voice steady though her pulse quickened. "My name is Maya Johnson. My husband and I moved in last year. House number 14, right across from the Lopez family." Karen Mitchell didn't flinch. Instead, she clutched her clipboard tighter, her eyes scanning Maya from head to toe. "That's funny," Karen said with a thin smile. "I don't recall seeing you at any HOA meetings. Are you sure you're not visiting someone?" The insinuation hit like a slap. Maya drew a slow breath, refusing to let anger crack her composure. "Not everyone can make every meeting, Karen. But yes, I live here. Maybe ask Mrs. Lopez. She knows me well." At the mention of her name, Mrs. Lopez shuffled closer, leaning on her cane. "She's telling the truth, Karen. Maya is my neighbor. She belongs here as much as anyone else." But Karen wasn't convinced. Her voice grew louder, carrying across the water where kids were splashing. "I'm just protecting the community. Rules are rules. If people think they can come and go without proving who they are, then what's next?" Whispers rippled among the bystanders. Some nodded uneasily, others frowned at Karen's persistence. Maya's chest tightened. She hadn't done a thing wrong, yet here she was, defending her right to exist in her own neighborhood. She considered walking away, letting it slide. But deep inside, something told her that this wasn't about rules. It was about control. And Karen had no intention of backing down. The air grew heavy as the standoff lingered. Children's laughter from the pool faded, replaced by the awkward silence of neighbors who didn't quite know where to look. Maya adjusted the strap of her tote bag, her patience thinning. "Karen, this is harassment," Maya said firmly. "I don't need to prove anything to you. I live here." But Karen Mitchell took a bold step forward, her face tightening with indignation. "Don't raise your voice at me. If you really belong here, then show me your resident ID or a key card for the pool. That's what every real homeowner carries." Maya's jaw clenched. She hadn't brought her key card. She wasn't planning to swim. She was heading to the park. "I'm not going to dig through my things just to satisfy your suspicions," she said evenly. Gasps fluttered through the small crowd. Karen's cheeks flushed crimson. She hated being challenged, especially in front of an audience. "I'm calling security," Karen snapped, fumbling for her phone. Before Maya could respond, Mrs. Lopez stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. "Karen, enough! Everyone here knows Maya. You're embarrassing yourself." But Karen waved her off, raising her voice further. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Outsiders sneaking into our community. If we don't enforce rules, we lose safety." Maya's chest burned with frustration. She had lived in Willow Creek long enough to know Karen's pattern, always targeting those who looked different. Today, it was her. Just as Maya considered walking away, Karen's hand reached into her oversized purse. Her fingers curled around something metallic. The crowd murmured, unsure of what she was doing, until a small black canister gleamed in the sunlight. It was pepper spray, and Karen's finger hovered over the trigger. Time slowed. The shimmer of the pepper spray canister in Karen Mitchell's hand was enough to send ripples of unease through the crowd. A mother near the pool pulled her children closer, while others whispered in disbelief. "Karen, put that away," Mrs. Lopez cried, her voice sharp despite her frail frame. "This is outrageous." But Karen's eyes were locked on Maya Johnson, her expression twisted with a mix of fear and superiority. "If you won't prove you belong here," Karen said, her voice shaking but loud enough for all to hear, "then you leave me no choice. I'm protecting the community." Maya's heart pounded. "Karen, think about what you're doing," she said, holding her hands up slightly, trying to de-escalate. "I live here. You're about to make a huge mistake." But Karen's hand tightened. Without warning, a sharp hiss cut through the air. A burning mist sprayed directly into Maya's face. The effect was instant. Maya gasped, stumbling backward as fire seared her eyes and throat. She dropped her tote, clutching her face, coughing and crying out in pain. Gasps turned into shouts. "Oh my God!" someone screamed. Neighbors rushed forward, some trying to help Maya, others yelling at Karen. But Karen stood tall, chest heaving, the pepper spray still in her hand. "You all saw it," she insisted. "I warned her. I had to act." Mrs. Lopez pushed past two bystanders to reach Maya, her cane clattering to the ground. "She's your neighbor, you fool. You assaulted her." Tears welled in the old woman's eyes as she tried to guide Maya to sit. Maya coughed, her vision blurry, but one thought cut through the pain. When David came back and found out what happened, nothing would ever be the same. The neighborhood pool, once buzzing with weekend chatter, was now a scene of chaos. Children cried as parents hurried them away, while others stayed frozen in shock. The sharp smell of pepper spray lingered in the air, mixing with chlorine and fear. Maya Johnson sat hunched on a bench, clutching a damp towel someone had pressed into her hands to ease the burning in her eyes. Her chest rose and fell in short, ragged breaths. Tears spilled uncontrollably, not only from the sting of chemicals, but from the humiliation of being attacked in front of her own neighbors. Karen Mitchell, however, looked defiant, gripping her pepper spray like a badge of honor. "I did what needed to be done," she declared. She refused to identify herself. "How else am I supposed to keep this neighborhood safe?" "Safe from what, Karen?" A man's voice boomed. It was Mr. Harris, a father of two who had lived in Willow Creek for over a decade. "Maya lives here. Everyone knows that. You just assaulted her." Other neighbors chimed in. "This is going too far. She had no reason to attack her." Karen crossed a line. For the first time, cracks appeared in Karen's confidence. She shifted on her feet, scanning the crowd that now looked less supportive and more enraged. Meanwhile, Mrs. Lopez knelt beside Maya, dabbing gently at her face with a wet cloth. "Hold on, sweet girl. Just keep breathing," she whispered, her voice trembling with both worry and fury. Someone pulled out a phone and began recording, narrating every detail of what had just happened. The video captured Maya's pain, Karen's stubborn arrogance, and the rising anger of the community. By the time the police were called, the confrontation was already going viral. Siren lights flashed against the neat rows of houses as two patrol cars rolled up to the Willow Creek pool. Neighbors parted quickly, forming a tense circle around the scene. Maya sat on the bench, still holding the towel to her face, her breathing uneven. The first officer out of the car approached cautiously. "What happened here?" he asked, scanning the shaken crowd. Before anyone else could speak, Karen Mitchell stepped forward, voice raised and authoritative. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This woman was trespassing in our community. She became aggressive when I asked her to leave. I had no choice but to defend myself." Maya's head snapped up, disbelief etched in her burning eyes. "That's a lie," she croaked, her voice hoarse from the spray. Gasps echoed around the poolside. Mrs. Lopez, cane in hand, pushed forward with a fierceness no one expected from her. "Don't you dare twist this, Karen. Maya is my neighbor. She lives here. You sprayed her for no reason." Several others chimed in, backing Mrs. Lopez. "We saw everything. She never touched you, Karen. You attacked her unprovoked." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. One crouched beside Maya, gently checking her condition. Ma'am, do you need medical assistance? Maya nodded slightly, her eyes still streaming. Please, I just want this to stop. Meanwhile, Karen kept insisting, you're all being misled. I was doing my duty for the HOA. If we let strangers walk in, what happens next? But the crowd was no longer buying it. Phones were out, cameras flashing red as multiple angles of the incident had already been captured. The officer stood tall and turned to Karen. Ma'am, we'll be reviewing all this footage, and if what they say is true, you're the one in serious trouble. As the officers gathered witness statements, Maya Johnson sat quietly, her hands trembling while Mrs. Lopez stayed close by her side. The burn in her eyes was easing, but the humiliation weighed heavier than the pain. Around her, neighbors whispered in outrage, some consoling her, others glaring at Karen Mitchell, who still stood stiff and unrepentant. Karen crossed her arms. You're all blowing this out of proportion. I acted within my rights, she insisted, her voice brittle but loud. One officer sighed, clearly growing impatient. Ma'am, rights don't include assaulting your neighbors with pepper spray. Karen opened her mouth to argue again, but her words froze when a new sound cut through the crowd, Maya's phone buzzing inside her tote bag, which had been retrieved by a neighbor. With shaky fingers, Maya answered. David? She whispered. On the other end, Lieutenant David Johnson's steady voice softened instantly. Maya, what's wrong? You sound hurt. Tears welled again as she tried to stay composed. David, something happened. I was attacked. Silence. Then his voice hardened, sharp with restrained fury. By who? Maya glanced toward Karen, who suddenly looked uneasy under the weight of 100 eyes. A board member from the HOA. Karen Mitchell. David exhaled slowly, the kind of breath soldiers take before action. Stay put. I'm on my way. Even through the phone, Maya felt the intensity in his tone. It wasn't just a husband speaking, it was an army lieutenant who had led men through combat, now hearing his wife had been humiliated and assaulted in her own neighborhood. The officer nearby leaned closer to Maya. Was that your husband? Maya nodded, her voice low but certain. Yes, and he's coming. The distant growl of an engine grew louder until a black SUV turned sharply into the Willow Creek parking lot. Heads swiveled as the vehicle came to a halt and the door swung open with deliberate force. Out stepped Lieutenant David Johnson, still in his army fatigues, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. For a moment the crowd fell silent. David's presence carried weight, discipline in every step, authority in every movement. His eyes immediately locked on Maya, still sitting with a damp towel pressed to her face. In an instant, the controlled calm of a soldier cracked into raw emotion. Maya, he breathed, crossing the distance in long strides. He crouched beside her, gently cupping her hands. Are you okay? Tell me what happened. Before Maya could answer, Karen Mitchell interjected, her voice trembling but defiant. Officer, I hope you're not letting this man intimidate everyone. I was protecting the community. His wife refused to identify herself. David rose slowly to his full height, turning toward Karen. The shift in his expression made the air feel heavier. You pepper-sprayed my wife, he said, his voice low, steady, but carrying the unmistakable edge of command. Karen faltered, her bravado slipping. She wouldn't prove she lived here. I was just doing my job. David took a step closer, not threatening, but unyielding. Your job is not to assault innocent people. My wife is a resident, she's your neighbor, and you humiliated her in front of everyone. The officers moved between them, sensing the tension. But David didn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone demanded silence. Around them, neighbors watched, phones still recording, the story spreading beyond Willow Creek with every second. Karen suddenly realized she had picked the wrong family to target. The officers positioned themselves carefully, sensing the fragile line between order and chaos. Lieutenant David Johnson stood tall, his hand resting lightly on Maya's shoulder as if to shield her from further harm. His eyes never left Karen Mitchell, whose confidence had begun to erode under the weight of the crowd. Sir, one officer said to David, we have multiple witness statements and video evidence. We'll be filing an official report. David nodded, his voice measured but stern. Good, because what happened here isn't just an assault, it's a violation of basic human dignity. My wife was targeted, humiliated, and attacked for no reason other than someone's bias masquerading as rules. Whispers rippled through the neighbors. Phones tilted higher, capturing every word. Karen's voice cracked as she tried one last defense. I was only doing my duty to the HOA. If she had shown her ID, none of this would have happened. Maya, still blinking through the stinging in her eyes, lifted her head. Her voice trembled but carried strength. I don't need to prove my existence to you, Karen. I pay my dues. I live here, and every neighbor here knows it. What you did wasn't about rules. It was about control, about making me feel small. The crowd stirred, nodding in agreement. Even those who had once quietly tolerated Karen's policing now shifted uncomfortably, ashamed of their silence. Mrs. Lopez, her frail hands gripping her cane, raised her voice. Karen, you've embarrassed this community more than you'll ever realize. Maya is family to us, and you treated her like a criminal. Karen's face paled as reality closed in. The police had the footage, the neighbors were united, and standing before her was not just Maya, but her husband, a soldier whose presence embodied justice. The pool deck had become a courtroom without walls. Every eye was on Karen Mitchell, and every phone lens captured her downfall. The tension pulsed like electricity as the officers finished reviewing the witness statements and the first few clips of video already circulating online. One officer turned to Karen, his tone clipped. Ma'am, based on testimony and evidence, you assaulted a resident without provocation. You'll need to come with us. Karen's mouth dropped. Arrest? For defending my neighborhood? David stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute. No, for attacking an innocent woman, my wife. You didn't defend this neighborhood, Karen. You disgraced it. The crowd murmured, some clapping softly, others shaking their heads at the woman who had once ruled their HOA with fear. Karen's hands shook as the officer gently took the pepper spray canister from her grip. She stammered, You can't do this to me. I'm on the board. I run this community. But Mrs. Lopez's voice rose above the noise, steady and sharp. Not anymore, Karen. You've lost the right to lead anyone. We won't stand behind someone who tears their neighbors down. Maya, still leaning against David for strength, whispered hoarsely. She thought she could take away my dignity with a spray can. But look at her now. David gave her hand a firm squeeze. Because you stood your ground, Maya. And now she faces the consequences. The officers began escorting Karen away, her protests fading into the background. Neighbors recorded every step, determined that the world would see exactly what had unfolded. As Karen disappeared into the flashing lights of the patrol car, the community let out a collective exhale. A new sense of unity replaced fear, and for the first time, Maya felt like Willow Creek truly belonged to her. The flashing patrol car pulled away, leaving behind a shaken but united community. Neighbors lingered, still buzzing with the shock of what they had witnessed. Some hugged Maya, offering tissues and bottled water. Others muttered angrily about how Karen Mitchell had finally gone too far. Lieutenant David Johnson stayed close to his wife, his arm around her shoulders like a shield. His soldier's composure never slipped, but his eyes revealed the storm within. Rage at the injustice, pride in Maya's resilience, and relief that she was safe. The officers approached one last time. Mrs. Johnson, one said gently, we've called for a medical team to check you over, and you'll be able to press charges for assault. We also recommend you notify your HOA formally. Given the circumstances, a removal from the board is inevitable. Maya nodded, her voice soft but steady. Thank you. I want to make sure no one else has to go through this. Around them, neighbors voiced their support. Mr. Harris stepped forward. Maya, we should have spoken up sooner. Karen bullied people for years. You stood tall today, even when she tried to break you. That took courage. Mrs. Lopez smiled through her tears, patting Maya's hand. You belong here, Mija. More than anyone. David glanced at the circle of neighbors, his voice carrying the weight of command but also gratitude. This community has a choice, to let fear and prejudice rule, or to stand together. Today you all chose the right side. Thank you for protecting my wife when I couldn't be here. The crowd applauded softly, not just for Maya, but for the moment that had shifted their neighborhood forever. But for Maya, the fight wasn't over. Tomorrow, she would face the HOA itself. The next evening, the Willow Creek clubhouse was packed. For once, the monthly HOA meeting wasn't about landscaping budgets or pool schedules. It was about justice. Every seat was filled, with residents standing along the back wall. At the front, Maya Johnson sat beside Lieutenant David Johnson and Mrs. Lopez, her eyes still slightly red but her spirit unshaken. On the opposite side, the remaining HOA board members looked uneasy, shuffling papers as whispers filled the room. The chairperson finally spoke. We've received numerous complaints and reviewed footage of the incident involving board member Karen Mitchell. Effective immediately, she has been removed from her position pending legal proceedings. Cheers erupted. Some neighbors clapped, others nodded in relief. For many, it was the end of an era of fear. Maya stood, her hands trembling slightly, but David's reassuring grip steadied her. She addressed the room. What happened to me wasn't just about pepper spray. It was about being told I didn't belong in my own home. No one should ever feel that way in their community. Her words carried through the room like a ripple, silencing even the murmurs. Mrs. Lopez raised her cane like a gavel. We will never allow one person's prejudice to define Willow Creek again, David added, his voice calm but commanding. This neighborhood can be stronger if we stand together, not divided. Maya and I aren't going anywhere. This is our home too. Applause thundered. Some stood, others wiped tears. The Johnsons weren't just accepted, they were embraced. As the meeting closed, Maya felt lighter. What began as humiliation had turned into empowerment. The community had seen the truth, and together, they chose dignity over division. For the first time, Willow Creek truly felt like home.